In the quiet town of Asheville, North Carolina, a young woman's final steps were captured on surveillance footage. Her name was Diana Calloway. A nurse, a daughter, a friend. Behind her walked a man the world would later know as Derek Winslow, a cold-blooded serial killer hiding in plain sight. What happened next shocked everyone. Asheville was known for its charm. The Blue Ridge Mountains, small cafes, streets lined with murals. It wasn't the kind of place where people thought evil would thrive. But Diana Calloway's story changed that forever. Diana was 29 years old. She had just finished her night shift at the local hospital. She was walking home, less than half a mile from safety. Trailing behind her was Derek Winslow. To strangers, he looked like an ordinary man. To investigators, he would later become a name that sent shivers down the spine. Before we dive deeper into this chilling case, don't forget we post daily. Subscribe so you never miss a story. Diana Calloway's life was built on compassion. At 29, she had already become a respected nurse at Mission Hospital in Asheville, North Carolina. Colleagues described her as the calm in the storm, the one who could steady a panicked patient with just her voice. She never sought recognition, but everyone who crossed her path remembered her. To her friends, she was loyal and warm. To her patients, she was the face of comfort in their most vulnerable moments. Her apartment sat just a short walk from the hospital. It wasn't glamorous, but it was hers. The small kitchen always smelled of lavender candles, her way of making the space feel like a refuge after long overnight shifts. Her walls were decorated with photos of family trips to the mountains, silly snapshots with her nieces, and Polaroids of her and her best friends laughing in diners long after midnight. Life for Diana was simple, but it was good. She worked hard, saved carefully, and dreamed of returning to school to specialize in pediatric care. She had plans. She had a future. But as Diana lived her quiet, hopeful life, another man's path was silently curving toward hers. Derek Winslow was nothing like Diana. At 36, he was a drifter, moving from one town to another, never staying long enough to be noticed but always long enough to study. He lived in shadows, disappearing into crowds, leaving barely a trace of who he really was. But investigators would later discover that this was part of his method. He thrived on anonymity. Winslow had been in Asheville for just a month, yet neighbors already spotted him lingering near the hospital late at night. He dressed in plain clothes, kept his hood low, and walked with a slow, measured pace. Most people dismissed him as a tired worker heading home. But Derek wasn't watching the hospital itself. He was watching the women who walked out of it. That's how he found Diana. Her routine became his obsession. She usually clocked out around the same time, earbuds in, walking with her tote bag swinging at her side. He memorized her rhythm, the pauses at intersections, the stop for coffee on her days off, the shortcut through side streets she sometimes took to avoid traffic. For Diana, these were harmless details of daily life. For Derek, they were notes in a twisted playbook. Still, Diana felt safe in Asheville. The city wasn't huge, but it wasn't tiny either. She loved the murals painted along the brick walls downtown, the smell of roasted coffee drifting through the air, and the hum of mountain life that seemed untouched by the chaos of larger cities. Asheville was supposed to be a sanctuary, but even sanctuaries can harbor danger. On the night of August 14th, Diana ended her shift, smiling at a coworker as she clocked out. She stepped into the cool air, adjusting her backpack. The streets were quiet, lined with streetlights glowing in a pale amber haze. She pressed play on her phone, music filling her ears. She didn't know it then, but Derek Winslow was just a block behind her, waiting, watching, calculating. And as Diana turned onto Patton Avenue, only 3 blocks from home, her ordinary walk was about to become the beginning of a nightmare. The air was still as Diana Calloway walked down Patton Avenue. It was just after 5 in the morning. The city was waking slowly, with only a handful of cars passing and shop lights flickering on in the distance. To anyone watching, it was an ordinary scene. But to Derek Winslow, it was the moment he had been waiting for. He had trailed her for weeks, never too close, never too far. On this morning, his stride matched hers, his eyes locked on the sway of her backpack. Every step was a calculation, every movement rehearsed. Diana felt the faintest twinge of unease. Her music dulled the sounds of the world around her, but something in her gut whispered that she wasn't alone. She glanced over her shoulder. A man, hood pulled low, his pace steady. She swallowed hard and looked forward again, quickening her steps. Winslow closed the distance. At 5:14 a.m., a hardware store's security camera caught the moment Diana turned into a narrow alley, a shortcut she had taken many times before. The footage showed her silhouette, confident but hurried. Seconds later, another shadow followed. Inside the alley, the world shrank. The walls were close, the light dimmer. The sound of her own footsteps echoed louder than they should have. She tugged her earbuds out, heart hammering now. Behind her, Winslow's shoes scraped the pavement. "Hey!" she called out, her voice trembling but firm. No answer. She turned, and that was when Derek lunged. The struggle was fast and brutal. Diana screamed, her voice slicing through the early morning silence. She swung her bag, scratched, kicked, fighting for her life with every ounce of strength. A bakery owner across the street, prepping for the day, later said he heard a sound that didn't belong. Like someone crying out but muffled. By the time he stepped outside to look, it was too late. The CCTV camera froze on a haunting frame. Diana's hand reaching upward, just visible in the corner of the lens. It looked like she was trying to grab hold of the camera itself, as if begging for someone to pull her through. Winslow overpowered her in seconds. The fight grew quieter. Her screams choked into silence. And then, nothing. He dragged her body behind a dumpster, hidden from the street, before vanishing back into the shadows. When police arrived minutes later, after a shaken passerby dialed 911, they found Diana lying motionless on the cold ground. Her earbuds were still tangled around her neck. Her phone, its screen cracked, buzzed faintly with a message notification she'd never read. Officers secured the alley, horrified by what they saw. They pulled the security footage immediately. On the grainy video, they watched the hooded figure approach, attack, and disappear. No clear face. No identity. Just the chilling outline of a predator. In that moment, Asheville realized the unthinkable. A cold-blooded serial killer was walking their streets. The murder of Diana Calloway sent shockwaves through Asheville. By sunrise, the alley was a hive of flashing lights, camera crews, and detectives moving with grim determination. The footage from the hardware store was chilling, but it left investigators with more questions than answers. A hooded man, his face hidden. The attack swift, merciless. And then silence. Detectives Carla Newberry and Marcus Ellison took the lead. Both were seasoned, but this case was different. The brutality suggested planning. The precision hinted at experience. This wasn't random. They knew almost instantly they were hunting a predator. Their first move was canvassing. They knocked on doors, interviewed store owners, tracked down anyone who had been awake at dawn. One baker described hearing a woman scream, then nothing. Another neighbor recalled seeing a man in a dark hoodie, pacing near the hospital days before. But the descriptions were vague. The face remained a mystery. Police released the video to the public, hoping someone would recognize the man's movements, his gait, his build. Tips poured in. Some were wild guesses. Others were deliberate hoaxes. But then, a call came from Knoxville, Tennessee. 2 years earlier, a woman named Kelly Hargrove had been murdered under nearly identical circumstances, dragged into an alley, strangled, left behind like discarded trash. The killer was never caught. But reviewing the case files, investigators saw the chilling similarities. Same time of day, same method, same kind of victim. Could they be dealing with the same man? Detectives dug deeper. They scoured criminal records across state lines, looking for men who drifted between towns, who had histories of violence but never stayed long enough to be pinned down. One name surfaced: Derek Winslow. Winslow's past was littered with red flags. Arrests for assault. Reports of stalking. A near charge for attempted abduction. But somehow every case collapsed. Witnesses dropped out. Victims moved away. Paperwork disappeared. Winslow had slipped through the cracks again and again. As they pieced together his movements, another pattern emerged. A string of unsolved assaults across North Carolina, South Carolina, and Tennessee. Each just far enough apart to avoid direct connection. Each victim eerily similar young women, often alone, often late at night or early in the morning. But then, a break. A city bus depot camera caught a man boarding a bus just blocks from Diana's hospital 1 week before her death. His hood was up, but detectives noted the posture, the stride. They compared it to the footage of Diana's killer. The match was undeniable. They traced the bus ticket. The name was fake, but the credit card used to purchase it led them back to one man, Derek Winslow. Still, tracking him wasn't easy. By the time they identified him, Winslow had vanished from Asheville. No credit cards. No phone records. No paper trail. He lived like a ghost, moving silently from one shadow to the next. Detectives grew frustrated. The public grew terrified. Rumors spread of other missing women. Families begged police for answers. Then weeks later, A discarded hoodie turned up near a homeless encampment on the outskirts of town. Forensic testing confirmed what detectives already feared: Diana's DNA was on it. So was Winslow's. For the first time, they had hard evidence tying Derek Winslow to the murder. The hunt was on. The discovery of the hoodie changed everything. For weeks, investigators had been chasing shadows. Now they had DNA, undeniable proof that Derek Winslow was the man who killed Diana Calloway. The manhunt stretched across state lines. Detectives released Winslow's photo to the media. News anchors warned viewers to lock your doors, avoid walking alone, and call 911 if you spot him. The FBI joined the search, branding him a high-risk offender, capable of striking again at any moment. But Winslow was slippery. He abandoned cars, used fake names, paid in cash. Witnesses reported seeing him in gas stations and bus depots, even sleeping in abandoned buildings. By the time police arrived, he was always gone. Then, in October, 2 months after Diana's murder, a tip came from Charleston, South Carolina. A dock worker reported a new hire who, kept to himself, wore the same clothes every day, and had eyes that never blinked. His name on the paperwork: Derek Winslow. Detectives moved fast. They confirmed his identity. A SWAT team was deployed to the shipping yard just before dawn. What happened next could have been pulled from a thriller. Officers surrounded the warehouse where Winslow was working. When they moved in, he bolted. He slashed at them with a knife, screaming incoherently, his face twisted with rage. The standoff lasted minutes but felt like hours. Finally, officers tackled him to the ground, prying the blade from his grip. He was dragged out in handcuffs, dirt smeared across his face, his hood torn from his head. For the first time, the world saw the face of the man who had terrorized Asheville, a face both ordinary and terrifying in its blankness. The trial that followed captivated the nation. Prosecutors laid out the timeline. Winslow had stalked Diana, studied her routine, and executed her murder with chilling precision. They revealed his connection to similar cases in Knoxville and beyond. Though those murders lacked sufficient evidence, the parallels were undeniable. The defense argued mental illness, painting Winslow as unstable rather than evil. But the jury wasn't swayed. They watched the footage of Diana's final moments. They saw her hand reaching toward the camera, frozen in time. They saw the DNA results, the hoodie, the witness testimonies. The deliberation lasted less than 4 hours. Derek Winslow was found guilty of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The judge called him a predator who thrived on fear, a man who would never walk free again. For Diana's family, the verdict was bittersweet. Her mother whispered, "Justice," as tears streamed down her face. Her sister clutched her hand, shaking, knowing that no sentence could bring Diana back. Today, a mural of Diana Calloway adorns a wall in downtown Asheville. Flowers are often laid beneath it by strangers who never knew her but feel her story deeply. To them, she represents more than a victim. She represents a reminder that even in places we think are safe, evil can walk quietly beside us. And though Derek Winslow is behind bars, investigators still wonder, were there more? Were there other Diana Calloways taken in silence, whose stories remain untold? The truth may never be fully known. What do you think? Was Derek Winslow responsible for more murders than we'll ever uncover? Share your thoughts in the comments. Criminal psychologists who studied Derek Winslow describe him as a textbook example of a compulsive predator. He wasn't driven by sudden rage or random impulse. He planned. He stalked. He rehearsed. For Winslow, the hunt was as intoxicating as the kill. Experts point to his ability to blend in as one of his most dangerous traits. He wasn't the type to draw attention, no wild behavior, no loud personality. Instead, he lived in the background, ordinary enough to be ignored. That invisibility gave him power. It allowed him to move freely, to watch without being watched. His victims fit a pattern. Women walking alone, often young, often kind-hearted. Psychologists suggest Winslow sought out women who embodied the goodness he lacked. By destroying them, he fed his craving for dominance. Every attack wasn't just violence, it was control. What makes him chilling isn't only what he did, but how he thought. To Derek Winslow, people weren't people. They were prey. Objects to be studied, cornered, and silenced. That cold detachment, that hunger for control, is what places him among the most frightening kind of killers. Those who walk among us unnoticed until it's too late. Diana Calloway's story is more than a crime. It's a reminder of how fragile safety can be, and how even in places we trust, danger can wait in silence. A nurse devoted to saving lives, taken by a man devoted to destroying them. Her family remembers her laughter, her compassion, her dreams for the future. And while Derek Winslow will spend the rest of his life behind bars, no sentence can erase the hole he left behind. At the heart of this case is a chilling truth. Predators like Winslow don't always look like monsters. They look ordinary. They walk our streets. They ride our buses. They pass us in grocery stores. And that's what makes them terrifying. But Diana's memory continues to live in her family, her patients, and in a community that refuses to forget her. Subscribe and watch our next case. And now we leave you with this question. Could there still be other victims of Derek Winslow waiting to be discovered? Or does the full truth remain buried forever? Tell us what you think in the comments below.